We've Galera Cordia agus Táfáilte wrote, welcome to be my guest with me, Mary Honan, on Lear Media TV, supporting the Samaritans Limerick and Tipperary, Clare's Wish Foundation in Limerick, and Deal Animal Rescue in West Limerick. And I am so privileged today. Didn't think I'd get this interview, but I'm really privileged to be speaking with Councillor Daniel Butler, who is the Mayor of Limerick City and County. Welcome, Mayor Butler.
Thanks very much, Mary. Thanks for having me. Delighted to be here.
You're very welcome. At the start of this, I wasn't sure whether to call you Mayor Butler or what the actual title is when introducing somebody, but you very kindly said to continue calling you Daniel. So, Dan, how did you get involved? I suppose, where did you grow up? In the first place, were you from the city?
Yeah, I'm born and bred in Limerick. I suppose majority of my life I grew up in Dooradoyle. My father is from Dooradoyle as well. He grew up in Dooradoyle, so actually where I grew up is his family home. So I suppose now you count my children, there's 4 generations associated with Dooradoyle. So when I grew up in Dooradoyle, though, it was a rural area. So I used to bale hay with my neighbours who were farmers in the summertime, and then it was almost overnight. There was houses just built in all those fields, and it became a largely residential area. So I've seen a lot of change over my lifetime there. You know, during the boom, when a period of 10 years, when just houses were just flying up. So yeah, I'm born and bred in Limerick. My family are from Limerick. My mother's from West Limerick. So she grew up in Glen initially and then moved to Arda.
Oh, really?
And I have all my family are still out in West Limerick. And then obviously my father's side are based in around the city. Originally from Ballinacurra, actually. My grandfather and my grandmother would have been from Ballinacurra area.
Glyn is beautiful. I mean, when I came from England, we lived in the Pike, which is called the Pike. It's Mulgrave Street. And that too was County Limerick. And I can remember a goat coming into our house, wandering in. That's the very youngest memory I have of a goat coming in. Of course, now it's very busy traffic going up Mulgrave Street past the prison and past the graveyard and everything. But at one stage it was County Limerick until they moved the borough back. Do you think that has given you, do you think that you've grown up, I suppose, from having parents who were from the county, with a county attitude rather than a city attitude, in the sense that your way of thinking of things would be more rural than city, if you like? Does that make sense?
No, I mean, I suppose, like, even though I suppose I grew up in Dooradoyle, my father would have been kind of my city. The family was from Ballinacurra, so like I kind of have both. I'm lucky. My father's kind of city side, and my mother's definitely county. So I have them both. But then my father would have been a county councillor, because Raheen Dooradoyle would have been in the county. So where you meet the Crescent Shopping Centre, that would have been the city-county boundary between when it was Limerick County Council and Limerick City Council.
Yeah.
So we would have bought the county edition of the Limerick Leader. That was kind of the thing, you know.
That's what I mean. Those sort of things. You'd buy the county edition of the Limerick Leader. My mum got her Fáinne Nua, and at the time the Gaelic League, she remembers, fell out, and the county fell out with the city. And she never managed to, then they moved and she became part of the city, and she never went to do the exam for the Gold Fáinne, apparently. And you know, you listen to these stories about county and city, and you have this idyllic image of living in the county as being so relaxed and so far away from what the city is. Now, you know, we're a bustling city, we're a real cosmopolitan city. Have you found that the city changed dramatically since childhood with you?
Oh yeah, definitely. It's seen a lot of changes. I think when I was younger, it still had a very much industrial feel to it.
Yeah.
It was still kind of emerging from that part of our history. I mean, I can remember even Arthur's Quay being built, and that, you know, and that kind of changed that area, and some of and even the docklands as well. You know, when the 2 mills were there, and you get the crossing point across the dock road as well, where you could get across. I remember it being blown down, you know, by Knox as well. that time. So it was very much more industrial kind of feel. Definitely, you got the sense as a working class city. And I think now we've seen it evolved away from that, you know.
I mean, when growing up, you had Clover Meats, and you had Mattersons, and you had all these big factories that employed, or companies that employed Shaws. You had that employed a lot of people and a lot of families. One family member would bring another family member in, and Danis, the clothes factory, and all of that. And families tended to bring family members in, and then you had Neodata in Limerick. I worked in Neodata services. It brought great employment. All of those gone. Are you like me when you think that progress isn't always progress?
Well, there's only one way to go, and that's forward. We can't go backwards. So look, I don't know. I think, you know, the city has evolved, and if you looked at the trajectory of Limerick, it's not too dissimilar to a lot of industrial cities. I mean, a good example is Liverpool in the UK, and how that's evolved away from being an industrial city, and the challenges that come with when you evolve from an industrial city. You know, an initial period of unemployment tends to be quite high. I mean, the industrial age kind of almost disappeared overnight and created large scale unemployment, and the social issues that are associated with that, I think we're still suffering them in a lot of ways. We're still growing as a city. But I think, you know, kind of one of the greatest drivers for social change and for the change in the city and look at the city has been access to education, and having such high standards of universities on our doorstep in Limerick has been a big contributor to seeing a more educated populace.
That's been fantastic, and moving the university into the city centre as well has been an important development, because it's been pretty far out for a lot of people. But you know, when I look at one stage, I had thought of going for the council, and one thing that I was really strong on was the housing situation. I was looking around and I was thinking, there's so many houses around, and they're boarded up. So many buildings boarded up, and you talk about Liverpool, and that's what reminded me of this. You know, there was an article on the paper about me mentioning about adopting the policy that they did in Liverpool, which was in Liverpool, what they did was they gave the houses away to people for £1, but only after they proved for 5 years that they could do the house up to a living standard. And within that 5 years, they could prove that it was for family and it wasn't for sale or for rent or for lease. And after the 5 years, if they could prove that that house was brought or that to a living standard, that they got the house for £1. And I was, you know, always wondering why we couldn't adopt something like that with the derelict houses that are around us. Lots of people who would have family members who would be unemployed tradespeople who could take over the running of those houses, do up the house, prove that it was habitable within 5 years, and take the pressure, say, off councils to always have the money to do up these houses, and also gives a family a home. And then Liverpool moved that into businesses. Actually, they did it several times with houses, and they regenerated all the houses in a certain area. And then they moved it onto businesses, and they started giving business people or people who wanted to start a business, give them premises, let them do it up themselves, take ownership of it, and then they gave it to them for a minimum fee. Do you think that that would work in Limerick?
I don't know about house ownership. You know, when it comes to social housing, I think there has to be greater flexibility than just rigid ownership. So like there is another housing model actually in Liverpool that's kind of a cooperative in nature, which is in a state that is intergenerational. So what it does is it'll have small 1-bed unit for maybe a couple or an older people. It will then have a 2-bed unit for maybe somebody that's just starting off in a family and they have one child. And they'll have a 3-bed unit as it grows, so that within an estate you can trade up and trade down. So as the children grow up, and then you don't need that space, and you trade down and you free up that house for somebody. So you have that kind of circular and reinvention and reuse of the space so it's optimal use. In some ways, one of the issues that we've had here is that, we have people in houses, and you see it quite a lot when you're canvassing, is older people in houses that could be 3 or 4 bed houses, and they're in there on their own, and they're struggling to maintain it, given the size of it, the grounds, everything. So you need to have greater flexibility in terms of ownership and how people move to meet their needs.
I get that, but there is the argument then that people have actually spent their whole life paying mortgages for a home and for a 3-bedroom house, and maybe they've outgrown it, but still they've paid for the mortgage for that home, and they, and they have the right to live in it. But I would be talking about, say, people who are living in hotels or B&Bs, or people who are living rough, who may have been tradespeople, who have fallen by in hard times, ended up in the streets. If they were given the option to do up the home or have a family member do up the home for them, rather than leaving buildings boarded up or buildings forever without anyone inhabiting it in any form, just to change the vision of the landscape, I suppose, and to make the city look more habitable than it is. But that would be just my gripe. I just see red when I see derelict houses and boarded up houses, and I see people who don't have homes and or don't have a place they're living maybe on a rent-to-rent basis, whereas they could have the potential of having that home for the rest of their lives with minimum amount of work that they have decided they're going to put in, and it gives them a sense of ownership of that house. I just think it's a no-win situation. Councils get ugly buildings off their hands, and people get, maybe it's a naive view of life, but that's the view I have, and I don't understand why something so simple can't be adopted. Everyone wins in a situation. But what brought you into politics? You mentioned your dad was a councillor. Was it a natural progression that you were going to go into politics as well?
It was kind of something maybe we had discussed, all right. But I suppose my own profession by day is I work with a community development organisation as a drug worker, and I've worked in the area of drugs in the inner city for 10, 15 years now. So I suppose I had my own views in terms of how society is functioning or not functioning, and what is a priority and what's not a priority. So we'd have differing perspectives, different views. But then unfortunately my father passed away quite young at the age of 56. And he was still a councillor at the time, and the question was asked to me, would I consider, finishing his term? And I did, and then I ran for election then, and I've been elected ever since. So
is it a bug? Is it a bug that once you start you can't get out of? This need to help people, the need to make a difference in people's lives.
Well, look, I suppose, it's a profession that I've chosen, but the psychologists in my life, because I work a lot in mental health, tell me that there's always a reason why we chose to do what we do. So, but look, I suppose, I mean, look, I'm in a job where I'm supporting some of the most vulnerable members of our community, and it's a job I enjoy, trying to make a difference, a small way of working with people who are trying to make a difference in their own lives, and that's been a huge privilege to be able to do that. And if in terms of politically, I feel it keeps me grounded as well to the reality of people's lives when representing people. So, and I suppose from that, and having politics in my life, I suppose it's maybe been an easier transition for me into it. But I suppose in my own head, I think I'm doing public service, and I'll do it for a limited time. I won't do it forever because it's just too demanding. But I'll do my time. I'll try make my contribution towards my city and my county, and do my best while I'm here, and then vacate it for somebody else to come along and do their best. So I suppose it's my contribution, my city contribution, for however longer I stay in politics.
You say it's, I mean, it brings its own stresses and that. I suppose when you're a counsellor, you're pretty much 24/7 involved in the job because you have to be there for people.
Hmm.
You have to be on call, if you like, I suppose, to an extent for people who need you. Do you feel that having the counselling background has prepared you for somewhat for that? I say that because, I mean, my PhD was on childhood under Nazism. So you're looking at the very worst things that happen to people and to humans and how they're treated. And I too have signed up to do a psychotherapy next year, or please God. So I do understand that the challenges that people have in their lives. And do you think that that has helped you, made you a better counsellor, leaving modesty aside?
I like to think so. I mean, my first foray into the area of drugs was actually in drug rehabilitation as an outreach worker, and I would have co-facilitated therapeutic sessions. So, and a lot of people that I would work with, unfortunately, would have had done time in prison as well for things that they did. So it gives you kind of sense of people's stories and how the circumstances can arise, and sometimes they can almost be a victim of their own circumstance and a victim of alcoholism or drug use or whatever it might be. So it gives you kind of sense to understand people's story. I suppose my focus always in politics is I have a job to do. Is to focus. I very rarely focus on politics. I focus on or the power or anything like that. I focus on the work and the person. And my hope is always try to connect with people as best I can and represent them as best I can, their voice, and amplify the voices of people that feel voiceless.
Yeah, it's very easy to look at a drug, somebody who's addicted to drugs, and look at crimes they have committed and look at them as a criminal, therefore, because of the crimes they've committed. But what you said is actually very, very poignant. They too are victims of an addiction that they can't help. People tend to say, oh, they should get over it, or they need to take a step back, and they need to look at themselves, and it's very easy to say to somebody that has an addiction that there is much, I suppose, captive to their addiction as somebody who has been kidnapped. They've been taken over by this addiction that they have to find a way through themselves, and only they can find that way through.
Yeah, I mean, many people that are in addiction, they will have suffered with some level of trauma in their past. But one of the biggest instigators of addiction is poverty. People living in poverty, relative poverty in the country. Poverty creates a lot of social issues, creates a lot of personal issues and mental health issues and physical health issues. If you're living in an area of poverty, you're more likely to suffer with heart attacks, with cancers, with mental ill health. You're not more likely to be the victim of crime. So poverty is a big indicator, and certainly
I would argue. I would argue, though, that there are many who have gone through social housing situations and have gone through their own levels of difficulties and traumas and that, and come out the other side and been able to. And I wonder, is it education more than poverty? Because I think there's the poverty of education and there's the poverty of living. If you're actually made to believe that you have something to contribute to society and you're helped to get an education, you can educate yourself out of poverty in many respects. But you've got to be very strong, and you've got to have a sense of belief in yourself, or that has to be empowered in you, that sense of belief that you are worthy and that you can, or that you want to make something of yourself. Some people are just crushed, not necessarily by the poverty that they've grown up in, or the homes or the housing estates that they've grown up in, but the lack of belief in themselves that education can get them out of it.
Poverty, is a lack of access to money, and if you don't have money, you have lack of access to healthcare, to quality healthcare. You have a lack of access to transportation to get you to a job. It has a large scale repercussions. But you talk about education. Definitely, third level attainment in areas of social disadvantage is very low. There's a very small amount of people going to third level from areas of social disadvantage.
It's very sad to see.
And certainly, one of the priorities I laid out this year that I've already put down to challenge our universities is that they need to reach out more to the areas of social disadvantage, provide them with the opportunity for education, because if you look across the world, the biggest driver for social change is education.
Absolutely. And I'm a great believer in lifelong learning. Most of my education was done as a mature student, having been made redundant from my job, going back, doing a degree, and then two masters, and then the PhD. And it's like that drug. It's something that you focus on, and this is what you want, and it redirects the mind, from traumas or from your social background or whatever. It's to redirect the person's mind and if they haven't got access to education, then, and as you say, third level education, if they haven't got access to that, then they're going to be stuck in that spiral of addiction or poverty.
Yeah, look, it's access to opportunity, opportunity for education and employment, opportunity to live safely and not have to worry about your personal safety, when in your own home and in your own estate. Look, there's a lot of challenges that we have to be honest about in the city that are ongoing, and we have a lot of work to do. The recovery of our economy has been for some, unfortunately, has not been for all, and it's all of our collective responsibility to do something about it. And suppose as somebody in my position, a big part of my job is to try and do something about that and give voice to people that may not feel heard, and give them access to my office and to power and influence as best I can, so that we can try and best represent our voices. But it's always a big challenge. And all we can do, like in any role or any job I do, is I'll try and do my best in that regard. But we've a lot of challenges in the city, and we have to be honest about them, and we have to take them on, and we have to do something about it. And hopefully, over the course of my year, I can try and maybe at least initiate some meaningful activity in that regard.
Yeah, I think it's important that people in power, people like yourself, are seen as being approachable, and you clearly are an approachable person, and seen as somebody who, when you talk to them, they listen, and they want to help. And I suppose your background has led you. It's molded you to be the person you are. That your educational background, your educational interests, your qualifications lead you to be the type of person that's a good listener and a good person who wants to help and is concerned about the social aspects of people's social environments. But what do you think of the directly elected mayor? And why haven't they voted in a directly elected mayor this year?
Well, look, the legislation has to go through the Dáil, so it has to go through various stages for that to happen.
Seeing as it was voted in,
Yeah. So like there's been a lot of consultation around initially here locally. Once we voted first to try and frame it and put it together, that then was sent to government. Unfortunately, with the way government is at the moment and COVID and everything else, there's a lot of legislation that's backlogged in the system. But I wouldn't be in too much of a rush at the moment with it, because from my opinion, the legislation isn't up to scratch quite yet. There needs to be greater powers devolved to the directly elected mayor. There's no point in having directly elected mayor if they have no meaningful power. Yeah. Otherwise, we're just going to have the status quo, really, to be honest with you. So I wouldn't be in a rush with it, because I'd rather get it right than rush it.
I say that my own ancestor was the very first democratically elected mayor of this city. Martin Honan.
Okay,
So,
very good.
So
Honan's Key. So Honan's Key
Honan's
named
Key.
after, yeah.
Honan's Key. Yeah. So I would be interested in that's what I was wondering about, why it had been stalled, if you like.
No, it's just going through the process. Unfortunately, it's slow. There's a massive backlog, and there's a lot of very important legislation that needs to go to the Dáil. But like I say, I've only made a submission myself there. I think in August there was further opportunities for councillors to make submissions to it, and I outlined some of my concerns in relation to the lack of power. To be honest with you, it needs to be more empowered as a role, and particular access to decisions that are normally made nationally. So access to the cabinet table, access to national bodies like the NTA in terms of making decisions in relation to transport locally, and other things. So they still have to make changes to it. I want to get it right. We have to get it right. We have to make success, because if the role itself is a success, then Limerick will benefit.
Daniel, you'd mentioned transport there. Another pet peeve, or not a pet peeve, another idea that goes through my head constantly. I think I have nothing else to do but just come up with ideas. But but I was, we're talking about you hear constantly this talk about pedestrianising the city and stopping traffic from coming into the city. And I would be against that per se, in that people say, I'd be thinking of people, elderly people, disabled people, who would then have to either get taxis out of the city to get to their cars, to get home or whatever. And I thought, for a long time, I've thought, why can't there be something like, if you like, the Lewis, a mini Lewis here in the city, where I see us having the perfect situation in the city for a very, very mini Lewis there at O'Connell Street, the cross between William Street, Shannon Street, O'Connell Street and Patrick Street, and that you could have coming from, say, the Dora Dáil direction straight out the whole way out to the St Mary's Protestant Cathedral and down through Corbally, and you could have then coming in from Castletroy, or not Castletroy, in from Ballysimon the whole way in, and then out to the Ennis Road. And you could have two sets of kind of, if you like, tram systems that would bring people in and out of the city without them having to spend money. What do you think of that?
Actually, the transport strategy, we've actually, as a council, we sent it back because we weren't at all happy with it in terms of the standard of it. And one of the requests, one of the issues that we raised was actually the idea of light rail to be explored, and also to explore the use of our current rail system that's around the city, see if that can be, brought back into use. So it's I'm definitely supportive of it. I mean, Limerick is, like you say, it's a very flat city. If you had a light rail system going from Castletroy to Raheen in terms of the spine, you could really have something really special for our city and really create a meaningful change.
Yeah, Ballysimon to the Ennis Road, or out as far as the 2 Mile Inn, and then Corbel or Ballykeefe, all that way straight out as far as Corbally, and you have that natural cross in the road that you could have. You could have a very, very well run mini Lewis style, I say Lewis, but just a free transport that would bring you in and out of the city, and people could just hop on and go out maybe to the Crescent Shopping Centre where they've parked their cars, and collect their cars and go in shopping there. And that way the city isn't congested, but people aren't discommoded, if you like. Everyone win-win again.
Yeah, look, I could say they're definitely supported at a council level. We've sent that back in terms of our feedback. That's why we should have our transport plan actually delivered by now, but we actually, because we sent it back because we're unhappy, it's been delayed. So I expect that to be presented in the next couple of months. But that is the request there is to explore light rail and to explore our current railway lines for potential use as well. Like the current system really is to kind of rely on the bus in terms of public transport. And the reality is, look, we transport the car and all that is one of our biggest polluters, and we need to increase our use of public transport in some way. So in order for that to happen, we need to make it attractive for people. So we need to make our public transport highly efficient and effective, and that's going to require a lot of discommoding in some ways. But it's something that we have to do. We have to address our climate challenges.
But I also think it should be free. It's a personal view of mine that public transport, this Lewis style system, should be free to encourage people into the city to spend their money, to sit down. When women, anyway, when they come in, when they have time, when they're not rushed, they spend and they shop. And they go in for coffee with their friends and they sit down. And it's only when you have time to spend and you don't have to be rushing for buses or rushing to get your car out of the car park, that you'll spend money in the shops. Everyone benefits then, because businesses thrive because they have people inside of them, people who want to spend, women. You know, if you have too much time in your hands and you're looking, you're going to spend money. If you have money in your pocket, you'll spend it on an item because you've had the time to look at it. But if you're rushing from shop to shop because you're afraid your ticket will be up. So I just think that a system that would be free for people to come in and out of the city and just let people spend in the city is something that would work, I think. What do you think?
Yeah, look, I mean, the only thing is these things cost money to run, so it's difficult, you know. But
I'm trying to commit you to a free traffic system.
But look, I mean, there's other things that we're looking at as well. We're looking at park and ride as well. So where you have a parking on the edges of the city, and you'll be transported in by bus, probably for free. We pay for your parking at a reasonable rate, and then part of that would be you get transported in and out. So there's loads of different options. There won't be one particular option is going to work for everybody. It's about presenting a range of opportunities for people to access.
Because I think the Lewis is fantastic in Dublin. It's absolutely fabulous. I mean, just to come out of the station, the railway station, and hop on a Lewis, and you see another Lewis passing you by going in the opposite direction. And I'm always thinking, because I did my PhD up in DCU, and constantly going up and getting on the Lewis and thinking, why can't Limerick have something like this, only smaller? You know, a two rail, that one goes one way and the other goes another way. And it's so simple to run. And have you any aspirations to go for the Dáil?
No, and I'm often given out by some close friends of mine that you never say no to things. But no, it's never been something that I would consider an option for myself. Politics is a difficult life, and my priority really is always my family. And I think to go into national politics, the sacrifices to your family are too much. I mean, the sacrifices to being a councillor are too much, but at least I get to be at home all week. I don't have to be up in Dublin 3 nights a week. And, you know, I can have a good chunk of the weekends for my family. So that's more important to me, to be honest, is my work-life balance and having that time with my family. It's kind of something that it's too important to me. So I feel like I'm doing my public service as a councillor, and I feel I can do that very effectively, and I'll do my time and I'll make my contribution to my city and county. But there has to come a time where I have to focus on my own life and my own family. So it's about having that balance is important for me.
At heart, you're a people person, and you're somebody who wants to get back to the counselling side of things, or the work you were doing before you went into politics, or before you.
No, I'm actually still doing that job. Unfortunately, when you're a counsellor, the wage wouldn't pay your mortgage, unfortunately. It's a representation payment.
Yeah.
So I still work now. As mayor this year, I'm going to have to take a leave of absence because it's not sustainable to be able to be a mayor and work full time. But it's very sustainable to be a counsellor and work full time, to be honest with you. So I still work both that's my main profession, is in the area as a drug worker. And the idea really with being a counsellor is that it's only supposed to be a part-time role. It's supposed to it attracts a diverse range of people into the role. But unfortunately, what we'll find is council people are dominated by people that are either quite young or quite old or self-employed. People like myself are very rare with young families and working full-time because it's just not sustainable. And to be honest with you, then decision making suffers because of that, because the more diversity you have in politics, the better decisions you make. But that's the reality of the role.
What brought you into into working with addiction? And I suppose, you must find it fulfilling?
Yeah, well, I kind of, my first half of my life was kind of business management, and then I decided I wanted to kind of have something different and do something more meaningful with my life. So I got an opportunity to work with Limerick Community Safety Partnership. It was an organisation set up here via the council to deal with antisocial behaviour in public housing estates. And from that, then I was approached to go and work for an addiction treatment centre. As an outreach worker, using the networks I developed in the communities to support individuals in that community to access treatment. And then from there, then I was asked to go for a role as a drug education prevention worker. So kind of working primarily with young people up to the age of 24 and trying to stop them getting into addiction. So getting that early intervention model, working with young people and their families, and indeed the workers that work around them to upskill them in how to deal with people and how to support people that might be using substances and at risk of addiction. So that's kind of how it kind of evolved organically in some ways.
Are some of the best things that happen in our lives things that happen organically? I find with me very much the same. My whole life was dance and Bunratty Castle. I was an entertainer there for 14 years. And then you suddenly go back to college and your whole life takes a completely different trajectory. And it's something I kind of say to myself, why wasn't I doing this all my life? Why was it what was it in your life that makes you go in that direction? Why do you take why does one take the directions they do? Is it something in their own life that actually makes them go in that direction? I know with me, I suppose it was you talk about your dad's death, my parents' death, and you want to make a difference in people's lives. You want your life to mean something, I suppose. Yeah,
life is more than going out and earning big money, like that's more job satisfaction isn't about money. It's about doing something that's fulfilling to you. So like for me, I found a profession that gives me an opportunity to work with amazing people that have, to be honest with you, a lot of people I meet, there might be an addiction, but you'd understand why they're in addiction, because you kind of go, if I had gone through what you've gone through, I'd be in addiction. I'd probably be worse. To be honest with you, so like what you meet is people, experience incredible difficulties in their life, and somehow they come through them. And one of the ways that they find to cope with it is sometimes addiction and substances. Yeah. But it got them through it, and they amaze me every day. They amaze me every day,
Yeah. Do it's like it takes a village to make a child or whatever, or to develop a child. I was talking to a colleague of mine in Irish dancing there one night, and I mean he's very successful now himself and his wife in Canada. But when he was 17, he had to adopt his three brothers and sisters in order to bring them from the UK to Canada, because he was only allowed a visa for himself or his children. So he had to adopt them because his parents died so young. And that made him the man that he became and brought them closer. But he was saying to me, it took a village to rear us, because he said, we didn't have parents, but we had Irish dancing teacher. I had an Irish dancing teacher, and we had the dance community, and we had the people living, his next door neighbours and all that, who all helped him to make the right decisions. And I think sometimes with youngsters who maybe go in the opposite direction and go down the drug addiction route, they don't always have the support systems behind them. Which is why I think sport and dance and activities, stage or whatever, performers, it's important to have that involvement in something, even if, whether it's the GAA, whether it's soccer, whether it's dance, whether it's drama or something, that you have that support structure around you. That's giving that little bit of a chance.
They certainly help. Like, being involved in activities certainly does help, because you say, you have that support network around your friendships, and that it definitely does make a difference to have. But sometimes you can even have those, and you can still go down the road of addiction, unfortunately.
That's so true.
But look, yeah.
But it is a help, and I look at what has happened.
The harm, yeah.
And Daniel, I look at what has happened with COVID, and with respect the government's the handling, say, of the arts. Any one of us in the arts have been the first to look to pull back from jobs, and the last to get back into the arts. And the arts, people involved in the arts or involved in sport, as I say, have a greater chance because they have people around them. You're involved in the arts, and again, what you said quite rightly, when you're passionate about something, it's not about the money. Many people in the arts are working for pittance, but they're working because it makes their soul breathe. And to tell somebody in the arts, retrain, you might have to retrain to become this or to become that. You can't retrain the soul. It's like you with your job, working with victims of drug addiction and things like that. It's what makes you tick. It's much more than a job. It's something that's in your very core to do. And it's very hard for the arts. The arts have taken a bashing, and you think, oh well, it's only dance, or it's only music, or it's only this, or it's only that. But it's the bond that's created between those who are part of the arts, who with their fellow artists or their fellow sports people, that they can't get in another job. How, do you think that, the arts should have been back long ago, or do you think, are you happy with the way things have panned out with the way COVID has?
I'm a believer in following public health advice. The public health advice, what it was. But that's one issue, and I won't comment on that because I'm not a medical expert. But definitely, I would agree that I think the supports that were put in place for those in the arts was near non-existent, and it did require particular intervention for them. And it should have had it a long time ago, much earlier in the pandemic than what it was.
Yeah.
And I do value the arts, because even in my own day job, and as we emerge from COVID, the arts will be very important, because what the arts does, and what I found it does for a lot of young people or people that are struggling, is it helps to put expression into something that people may struggle to put expression into by talking or using words. It creates there's a healing in it as well, in the arts.
Absolutely, 100% agree.
I think we'll turn to the arts as we emerge from COVID, as the wounds that we'll have suffered, the traumas we'll have suffered over the last year, and the stress and the strain will start to become evident as we emerge from COVID. We will need the arts to help us to move through that and to heal that. And definitely we have let the creative community down. I think definitely.
Absolutely, 100%. And I say it myself. I never earned much money from teaching dance, but most of the time, you'd often, people would say, look, I don't have it this week, can I pay you next week? And you'd still have to pay for a hall. But it was just, it was the connection, say, with your childhood, everything that you grew up to be doing, the people that you met along the way, the therapeutic side of it, that it was there. Dance was there for me at the best of times and at the worst of times. And when I lost my, my parents both, and I'm an only child, died within a year of each other. Mom was diagnosed 2 days later after my dad died, and dance was there, and nobody can tell me to retrain, because you can't retrain something like that. And it's the same for everybody who's in the arts. I interviewed Tommy Fleming, the singer, and Mick Hanley. And Tommy is really an upbeat person, but he was never so downbeat as he was. I've interviewed him several times, but this time around. And he said we've been completely forgotten about. And the tragedy of it is that, he said, the people that I'm going to be looking for when we're allowed back to do the sound and to do the music and to do the lighting, are the same people that every musician is going to be looking for, because there's so few of them in the industry working for all the artists in Ireland. It could take, he said, me 6 years before I'll get back to do a proper concert, because I'll have to wait in line. And that wasn't even given a consideration. Do you know, the Irish dancing community, of which I'm a part of, has been decimated really through all of this. And I mean, it's not just dancing, it's, as you say, it's counseling, it's therapy for many children who are trying to, who haven't got anybody else at home. Only children like I was, whose lifeline was dancing and the arts. And that wasn't, it was almost like we weren't important. We were just frivolous. And really, we're far more an important community than we were given credit for. And I hope that it'll change. You know?
Yeah, I hope so too. And look, thankfully, the roadmap now is leading us to the ends of the current reality, and I'm looking forward to getting out and going to a gig and dancing myself again.
So am I.
Because that's something that it feeds my soul, is music, and live music in particular.
Yeah.
But look, we have to finish up now, because I have another meeting to go to. But I really enjoyed the conversation, Mary, and I hope you have too.
I have indeed, and on that point, Mayor Butler, I thank you for being my guest, and I wish you continued success in both your position as mayor and in your work outside of the role of mayor of Limerick City and County.
Thank you very much, Mary. I really appreciate it.
And wish you and your family a blessed year to come. Thank you very much. Shindera Leshon Clor. That's the end of the show for today. Until the same time, or until the next time, the Poon of Day, Wawalam Tugalir, Chiacona, Sonus, Agus Gra. I wish you peace, happiness, and love. Agus Gadeship Sloan. Sloan, Daniel.
Sloan, Gorimila Margaret.
Nabare.